So what really is the difference between CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow and black, and RGB, red, green and blue? And how can we explain this in a very simple way? And what is this additive and subtractive model that everybody is talking about? And how does it work? And why does it matter which color model we use for printing versus the color model we use to display on the internet or on devices? Those are just a couple of the very confusing questions that a lot of people have. If you want to know how we as humans see color and how we perceive color, then watch this video over here. This might also help you understand this video a lot easier. First of all colors are RGB. CMYK is just another way to present RGB. So in order to understand CMYK, you first have to understand RGB. RGB is just the main colors that we as humans see, red, green and blue. And all the other colors are just actually a mixture of that colors. These three colors are the base colors of light. And the key word here being the word light. If you mix red light with green light, you get yellow light. So you start with black, with no light. So you go into your room, you switch off the main light, and there's nothing. You can't see anything. It's pitch black dark. That's black, that's nothing. Then you add red light, add being another keyword, and you add green light. The result would be yellow light. So adding more light. So that is called the additive model. So you start with black, no light, and you add light or you add color. And that is the basics of RGB. It's really plain and simple. And the reason why most devices on the internet, or most devices in general, like computer screens or TV screens or your phone or your tablet, why they use the RGB model is because they create light. They add light. So do yourself a favor, take a magnifying glass and look very closely at the white part of a screen, whether it's a TV screen or a laptop screen or a phone screen, doesn't matter. And you will see that there's actually tiny little red, green and blue lights. So any screen creates light. And that's why screens use the additive model, which is RGB. So thus, if a device with a screen or a TV, because it uses the additive model and it uses RGB, it starts with black. That's very important. It starts with black, which is no light, and it introduces color or it introduces light. And if we add a full red light, a full blue light, and a full green light, the resulting color is a white light. So if we add all the colors, we get white. And if you look at a lot of the RGB screens or devices in general, even the internet, most websites and games, applications, they use a lot of white. Majority of your screen is usually white. And to add a shortcut or a little bit of a hack, a lot of the manufacturers have added another white light into their displays. So if you look closely with a magnifying glass, you'll actually see a red, green, blue, and additionally a white light. But this is not all displays. This is only some displays. So the white light is a little bit of a shortcut. And that allows the manufacturers to, instead of switching on R, G, and B, all three of those lights, they only switch on the white light. That saves quite a bit of power, and it also extends the lifetime of the RGB lights or the LEDs, because some of these LEDs over the years they lose their potency a little bit, and you'll see that some of the screens, the colors do fade after a year or two of use. But because it uses so much white and you have only a white light in there and you use that majority of the time, your other three lights, your R, G, and B, lasts a lot longer. So your lifetime of your screen actually lasts longer. But obviously, if you still want to display another color, you still have to use your R or your G or your B or some of them to create that color. And this basically introduces a new model that you can call RGBW, which is your white, which is the shortcut. You can also use the white light to display your full gray spectrum. So starting from black all the way up to white, all the other grays in between, you can only use your white LED or white light to display all those. So that is basically how your additive model works and how RGB in general works. So now on to CMYK. Now CMYK is RGB. It's just a flipped version of RGB. It's a negative of RGB. And to understand this, you first of all need to understand how ink or pigment or paint works. Then you can understand how CMYK works. Now most of the light that we have that illuminates our world, whether it's your car light, the street light, the sun, your ceiling light, a flashlight, it doesn't matter. Most of these lights are white. It is a white light. Even though some of them have a little bit of a yellowish tint or a bluish tint, it's still majority white. It contains all the colors. The ratio between these colors is just slightly different, that either creates a blue tint or a yellow tint. Now because these lights that actually illuminates our whole world are mostly white, it actually produces white everywhere. But now when you look at a tree or maybe a leaf on the tree, you see that that leaf is green. What that means is the white light that is everywhere is getting reflected from this leaf and goes obviously into your eyes, and you see the color green. So what happens is the only color that survives the reflection is green. The colors that are destroyed or absorbed by the leaf is the color red and blue. So it subtracts red and blue. It removes red and blue. So the color of everything around us, whether it's your desk, whether it's a tree, whether it's your skin color, whether it's paint, ink, your hair color, doesn't matter. Everything is determined by the color that it removes, not actually by the color that it reflects or the color you see. What you see is the color that survives the reflection process. So if a desk is brown, it means that brown is the only color that survived after it was reflected from white light. So that's where the subtractive model comes in. The subtractive model starts with white, and then it either subtracts red, green, or blue. And then what's left is the color that you observe or that you see. If a specific object absorbs all the colors, then what remains is nothing, or the color black. So if something absorbs all the color, then it means that that item is black. So this is where some of the differences between the additive model and the subtractive model is starting to be noticed. The additive model, if you add everything together, you get white. The subtractive model, if you subtract everything together, you get black. So the question you might ask is, how does any of this have anything to do with CMYK? Now, as I mentioned before, CMYK is the opposite of RGB, or the negative of RGB, or the negative of RGBW. Now, as I also mentioned before, the W in RGBW is a little bit of a shortcut or an energy saver. Now, in exactly the same way, the K in CMYK is a little bit of a shortcut or an ink saver or a paint saver. So to make sense of all of this, let's just go through each of the CMYK colors. So the first one is cyan. Cyan is the opposite of red, which is the first letter in RGB. So cyan is the absence of red. Cyan means there is only green and blue. There is no red. And that's also the color you get when you only have green and blue light. You get cyan. The same with magenta. Magenta is the opposite of green. Magenta is the absence of green. Magenta means that there's only red and blue in that light. And that's the color you get when you have red light and blue light. And lastly is your yellow. Your yellow is the opposite of blue, which means that there is no blue. It's the absence of blue, which means that there's only red and green light, which gives you yellow. And that's why CMYK is seen or is used in the subtractive model because it takes away. Each one, the C, the M, or the Y, takes away a color. And if we paint something, or we draw something, or we print something, we can only subtract colors. We can't add colors because the actual ink doesn't illuminate light. It only reflects light. So that's why paper is also white, because paper gives you all the colors, and then whatever you put on the paper, the ink or your pencil, that will then remove the colors that you don't want, and anything that remains is the color that you can see. So if you actually want to print red on white paper, you need to remove the green and the blue components so that only red remains. So now the question is, what CMY colors is the opposite of green and the opposite of blue? So that would be magenta, which is the opposite of green, which is the absence of green, which basically means it subtracts green, and yellow, which is the opposite of blue, or subtracting blue. So if you print a layer of magenta followed by a layer of yellow, the result that you get will be red, because you've in essence removed the blue and the green. So it really is that simple. CMYK is just the opposite of RGB, or actually RGBW, with the K just being a little bit of a shortcut. So you can save ink. Instead of printing cyan, magenta and yellow, you can just print black, because most of the documents that we print uses black text. And that's also why your black cartridge in an ink printer is bigger than the other three colors, because you print so much black. It's just a shortcut. You can actually use a printer or create a printer which doesn't have K, and you'll still be able to produce exactly the same images. The only result is you're going to use a lot more ink, and the quality might not be that great because obviously you're printing 3 layers of ink. You're printing C, M, and Y to get black. So that's it. The basic is that everything that emits light, or that creates light, or that shines light uses RGB or RGBW, and everything that absorbs light or reflects light or filters light or removes light, that uses CMYK. Another interesting experiment that you can actually do is you get into a room. Obviously it'll work best if it's nighttime. You switch off all the lights, you close the windows, close the door, make sure it's nice pitch black dark. Then you get a red light. Now this light must be a proper deep red light. And you get a blue object. And you'll see that if you switch the red light on and you look at the blue object would appear black, because the blue object only reflects blue light. It absorbs red and green light, but the only light you have in the room is red light. So that means that all the light that hits this object technically gets absorbed or subtracted. So nothing is left. So that means that the object appears black, even though the object technically is blue. I hope that answers all your questions. If I've missed something and you still have more questions, feel free to leave a comment and I will definitely get to that as soon as I can. If you fancy this video, then like it. If you want to see more of my videos, then subscribe it. Till next time, ciao.